is 6:04 p.m. I'd like to call to order the December 19th meeting of the San Francisco Elections Commission. Secretary Chan, can you call the roll, please?
President Donaldson?
Yes.
Donaldson present. Vice President Logie? Logie not present. Commissioner Bernholz?
Present.
Bernholz present. Commissioner Hill? Hill not present. Commissioner Giordano?
Here.
Giordano present. Commissioner Jump?
Here.
Jump present. Commissioner Rowe? Rowe not present. I see Vice President Logie arriving.
Am I in tardy?
Logie? Okay. You have a quorum.
Very good. Thank you. All right. So, next item, please.
Item 2, general public comment. Public comment on any issue within the Elections Commission's general jurisdiction that is not covered by another item on this agenda.
Hello, Commissioners. Brent Turner with California Association of Voting Officials. Just a bit of housekeeping relating to past events that have now come current due to the news cycles. I just wanted to read into the record. For many years, election reformists have alleged that verified voting and other grant-absorbing groups are fronts for Microsoft and Microsoft's efforts to obstruct open source election system projects. The group Verified Voting has been paraded in front of this commission by one Jim Soper as if they had valuable expertise to lend. Microsoft has now publicly stated that they fund verified voting as was alleged. I have printed out a tweet in your package for your perusal. This is to say, when we are dealing with a vendor such as Microsoft, or as my associate former director of the CIA, Jim Woolsey, states, those who bob in their wake, close parenthesis, close quotation, like Oracle or Dominion, we must recognize not only them for what they are, but also their thinly disguised tentacles. We must remain watchful and inoculated against verified voting, OSET, and all other vendors that have intentionally destroyed other open source voting system projects. It must be noted that Microsoft has now purchased GitHub. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Any other members of the public? Seeing none, next item, please.
Item 3, open source voting. Discussion and possible action regarding the City and County of San Francisco's open source voting system project.
Commissioner Giordano, do you want to give an update on TAC?
Sure. So we've had 2 meetings since the last commission meeting, I think. In November and also in December. And in our November meeting, Director Gerald came, which was great. We had a discussion with her. And so over the past couple meetings, 2 things that we've been working on are, we've been continuing work on the open source results reporter. And we're at the stage where we're starting to style it to make it look a little bit nicer. And also as well as parse the department's raw elections data. And it has some extra features like it will be able to display a summary of the rounds of the rank trace voting within the first election summary page. And we've also began discussing something called a contributor license agreement, which would be something that would allow members of the public to contribute code to the code that we're working on. And so we've started to discuss that with the City Attorney's Office to get some guidance. And then we're going to have our next triennial report in early January ready for the commission. And I think that's about it.
Very good. Any questions for Commissioner Giordano? Okay. Next item was project progress, and I see we have Director Gerald in the audience, and Director Gerald has agreed to provide an update. So thank you.
A few handouts. I apologize. I left my thumb drive in the office.
Thank you.
One copy. Don't have share. So just briefly today, I thought I'd review where we are with our project initiation plan. We're still in the project initiation phase. We have completed the hire of our project team. We have hired a community workshop facilitator. We are in the process of confirming stakeholder participation, agency level governance and decision making that is done in our decision matrix and how we're doing the organization review. We are reviewing right now background documents and case studies of existing open source projects in the country and overseas, and basically doing a review of current open source election projects, and we'll have a briefing for you on that when it's complete. I think what's interesting is trying to separate fact from fiction and make sure that if something could contribute to the effort that we identify it, and those things that would just be a distraction we don't include. There are lots of people that have worked on this. There are lots of people that have good information. We're also researching the work that's been done by LA, and so there's more to come on this. Next, the open source voting project team. We've made 2 hires. One is Sean Roberts. He's a San Francisco Bay technology leader, computer engineering BS from San Jose State, experienced and worked with Lincoln Networks, Yahoo EDS, ADP, and Electronic Arts. Founding member of the OpenStack Foundation, which is actually an open source platform for cloud technologies. He's the director for Open Data Initiative. He also has been the chair for the Public Policy Working Group for the Open Source Initiative. His role on the project team will be technical project lead focused on assessment, requirements, security, and hardware. The next project team member is Michael Kelly. He's been a consultant for 31 years on complex and business/IT initiatives. He has a computer science degree from Berkeley. His experience is with Ernst & Young doing research, and his engagements have been with GE, Siemens, Hewlett-Packard, Samsung, and PG&E. One of his recent projects has been LA County Registrar of Voters and LA City Elections Division. He has very strong project management experience for complex projects, including ERP implementations, websites, and custom development. His role on the project will be focused on project planning, scheduling, communications, community engagement, and roadmap development. So I think we have some talent. We had some excellent candidates for our project team. We certainly appreciated everyone's interest in the project and time as they interviewed with us. We were looking for skill sets that would match and mesh with the DT team that is also supporting the project. So we have skill and talent in the DT team, so we were looking for where those gaps would be. So I think we found some staff that will be able to help us move forward. So the next page is about project team roles and governance. Then a little bit of modification to this to really be more clear about how escalation will happen to the project stakeholders, which is the Director of Elections and myself. The executive sponsors really are the City Administrator and the Mayor's Budget Office, and I think everything else is pretty much the same. So, you know, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Director Sherrill. Other questions, commissioners?
Yeah, just one question. First of all, congratulations on the 2 hires. That's fantastic.
Yes.
Really great to see. I was wondering if you could maybe just talk a little bit about how were both of these hires an outgrowth of the hiring? This.
Yes.
Okay.
They were all interviewed in the same rounds as everybody else.
Okay, great. And then we have the funds for 2 different positions. Excellent.
Michael is actually more part-time than full-time.
Director Sherrill, could you provide a little more information? I'm looking through your project initiation, which is, it's great to have a checklist here of items. And you mentioned that the confirm stakeholder participation, which I assume does refer to your project team roles in governance. Can you describe a little more about that confirmation and what that entailed?
Well, I think it's important to understand how project decision-making will escalate,
Yep.
how funding conversations will escalate, and now that we're starting to work on the budget for 1920, it dawned on me that really those decisions are not made at a project level, they're really made at the mayor's office level. So it's appropriate to change that. The way I had it before wasn't correct.
So the mayor's office, I guess that's what I'm asking. So the mayor's office has looked at this. They're probably one of the most important.
But they definitely know what we're doing, and it's just a reflection of how city government works.
Yeah.
So even within the DT budget, we propose things to the mayor's office, and we are given guidelines from the mayor's office on what we can do, and then it is always the budget office's decision as to what's funded and at what level. And things can change over time. So, we put our proposals in and then are prepared to have that conversation with the mayor's office, and then we also have that conversation and are expected to present to the board of supervisors. So there's opportunity for it to change along the way. So it's not at the project level, it's a higher level.
Great. So my takeaway from that is, in essence, that this has been socialized and validated by the parties. Okay, great.
And just one follow-up question on that, Director. Is there, other than the change you've described, any other change between this chart and the last one?
I made some typo changes. Let's see.
Just substance.
Of substance? No, I don't think anything of substance. I think I changed some words, added the consultants in. I think it's important to note how this project will work. I think one thing that I'd like to point out, we've talked about having an independent validation and verification team. I'm planning on talking with the controller's office about that, rather than bringing in someone from the outside. It really would help us in a number of ways to have that be something the controller will help us. I just haven't contacted them yet. I wanted to get our project team set first, get some things started, and then we'll start asking the controller for help.
Also, is the LA County project that Michael Kelly was involved in, is that the same as the VSAP project or something else?
On the survey, how long do you expect that to take? And is there some place where the public can get sort of an idea of what projects you are surveying in terms of open source and voting?
Nope. We'll have a draft report, okay. And then of course people can comment.
Okay.
But it's meant to be a briefing of our project work. It's not necessarily something that is it's just meant to inform the project team and the project team's work, and is geared to inform how we're going to make decisions about direction on the project. So it's more fact. It's all fact. It's all fact, not strategy or approach or opinion. So that's what we need at this point. So that's what we're building right now. But we'll be happy to give you a draft as we get closer to done, and be welcome to take comments.
That'd be great. Appreciate that.
And also, have the two people already started yet? Or are they?
One has started.
Okay.
And I guess my final question would be, so you went to the TAC meeting. Is that, have you guys, has the TAC and you or your project, I guess your project representatives aren't on board yet? Have you talked further about how the TAC will work with Department of Technology, or maybe you can say what went on at that meeting in terms of the interaction?
So in that meeting, we just did a deeper dive on the plans and the document that I had presented at the commission meeting. I think the conversation was really more about phases and what is coming up next. We'll start, once we have the landscape done, then we'll start working on the planning. And some of the early work there is going to be around key strategies for the system, and then also very discrete requirements. So as we move forward in this process, we definitely need a partner, and we need to, as we're working with partners, put our best foot forward. So you need to go into those conversations with what is in the world. You've done your due diligence. What are your needs, and the strategy and the requirements around that. And then you can start to have that conversation, because any of our partners would be evaluating risk, evaluating schedule, all of that forms a cost. So we want to make sure that maybe we need a letter from the commission about how you're supporting this effort. So you go in with those conversations with as much information as you can, because you want somebody to make an informed decision. So we're getting that documentation ready now.
Mr. Giordano, any comments on that?
Well, that was the first meeting that she came to, and I think that the plan was to continue the dialogue in future meetings with either her or other team members.
Great. All right. I don't have any further questions, Commissioner. Thank you, Director Gerald. Director Arntz, I don't know if you have anything to add. You noted in your director's report these two positions that were being hired for. Anything to add?
No.
Okay. Then let's open for public comment. Three minutes. Yeah.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the Commission, Alec Nash. I want to also assume my congratulations for having reached this point. I think we are at the end of the prologue and at the beginning of the beginning of this fine exercise that we are undertaking, and I want to commend everybody in the room for the efforts to get us to this point, and to wish us all a Godspeed. Thank you.
Mr. Bash.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is David Carey. Last month was the 3-year anniversary for this Commission adopting its policy on open source voting. Since that adoption, the progress towards implementing that policy has been dismal. In many regards, the progress has been one step forward and one step back. Generally, it's been one step forward by volunteers who actually want to see the project succeed, and 2 steps backwards by government bureaucracy that sometimes is indifferent and sometimes behaves with a thinly veiled antagonism to the project. 3 years, and there is not even a statement of the department's business requirements. I'm not talking about detailed technical designs, just business requirements. 3 years, not even high-level business requirements, not even a draft proposal of business requirements. Who knew that a feasibility study might benefit from having business requirements, high-level business requirements even? 3 years, and COIT has yet to be given a credible funding request, one with at least high-level deliverables, resources, and a schedule. The first year in early 2016, that was understandable, but not since then. This Commission bears a great deal of responsibility for the lack of progress. Your executive employee has indicated that at best he is indifferent to implementing the policy. That elicited barely a whimper of protest from this Commission. There's been no dialogue, at least no collective public dialogue from this Commission, to explore why that gap in goals exists or how it should be closed. The Department of Technology might contribute a lot to this project. That's yet to be seen. But their participation does not relieve you and your Director of Elections of the vital roles that each of you will necessarily still have. 3 years, and what other jurisdiction is now more inclined to join this project? Who wants to join in when San Francisco still isn't committed to the project, doesn't have a plan and a strategy even for itself, and has no early successes to point to? As I told this Commission well over a year ago, you'll need to adopt some new behaviors to make this project successful. the Commission's traditional, more passive, reactive, and deferential posture will not be and has not been sufficient. The Commission has never asked for a project plan. It has never set 2 or 3 year intermediate goals, never asked for the executives for proposals for such goals. There is now not even a 1 year goal for the project. People who have offered such goals and done much to get the funding you now have, you have revoked. Going forward, you can do better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. Cabo, wanted to bifurcate my comments. First of all, up until hearing Mr. Carey's comments, I was sort of feeling pretty good. But now I feel childishly naive. But I think we're somewhere in between. I do have hope that this is going to move forward properly from this point and expeditiously as the circumstances of the country would call for. If everybody's watching the news on a daily, we know this is the #1 issue of our time, is to make sure we can get a proper vote count. The second part is a little on the past issues. We are recognizing that the vendor, Dominion, and their salesperson, Steve Bennett, has publicly stated that open source voting is a threat to their business and they intend to fight it. Again, is harkening back to my previous comments, we have to be extra vigilant here because we've already seen 2 projects like this tanked by outside interference folks, we'll call them. So we've seen that happen in Texas, and we've seen meddling with this project in Los Angeles, which makes the Los Angeles project really not a good one to go by. We're unfortunately in that position where we're pioneering this project to do it right for the first time in the United States. Other than we can be looking to New Hampshire, who did a 90% proper system. They still need the tabulation piece, but Dr. Gilbert's system there is a pretty good system, and we do have, luckily, in this area, Alan Deckert, Brian Fox, and Dr. Gilbert to refer to, as they are the ones that have actually flown a plane out of this area previous. So experience is a good piece of this, and I again want to refer to them. We have to inoculate against Dominion intentionally destroying this project, because that is obviously going to cause delays if they have their fingers in this pie. And then finally, we need to address the DFM issue. The open source community is focused on the problems associated with DFM, and we're trying to make sure that we're paying attention to that as a crucial part of this open source project. Thanks again, and congratulations to all of you, especially the new Commissioner Bernholz. Thank you for coming in at this time and being a part of this great moment for our democracy. Thank you.
Mr. Turner, further public comment? Seeing none, next item.
Item 4, BOPEC's recommendation to approve the certification of the November 6, 2018 election. Discussion of possible action on the BOPEC's recommendation regarding the conduct of the November 6, 2018 consolidated general election.
Okay, so at the BOPEC meeting, we reviewed the results of the election, the various reports that were provided by Director Arndt on the election. We looked for also to see if we had any reports from the public or emails, contacts from the public with concerns around the election. Had none. We reviewed the various reports, and BOPEC as a group found that unanimously that we recommend to the Elections Commission that we find this to be a free, fair, and functional election. I will ask my fellow commissioners on BOPEC to provide any additional comments. Do they have any? Seeing none? Yes.
So at BOPEC, I didn't have the numbers for the non-citizen votes.
Yeah.
So there were 65 registrants and 59 of the 65 voted. So it was a 91% turnout. Then also Commissioners Mogi and Jung and Donaldson asked the number of pre-registered voters that cast ballots. So the voters that were pre-registered from after the June election prior to November, there's 771 and 394 cast ballots. So that's a 51% turnout for the pre-registered voters. So 394 of 771 pre-registered voters cast ballots. And that's pre-registered after the June election cycle. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that follow-up. So commissioners, any discussion of the results or the documents provided as from the election?
Just to say a couple things. I was a polling place inspector in my home precinct, and which it was actually one of the more challenging times. Just the reconciliation took a lot longer than it normally did for various reasons. But I didn't prepare any sort of written document for today, but I did receive one suggestion from a member of the public that I thought was an excellent suggestion that would be pretty easy to do, and that was, there was an article in the paper about the high voter turnout, and but the suggestion was to report not just the percentage of registered voters, but also the percentage of eligible voters that vote. And the Secretary of State website does have an estimate of eligible voters, like there's a 15-day estimate. So, and I just did the division on that, and it would be 56.4% of eligible voters voted, and then we had the number that you publicized, 74.6% of registered. So, but I think it might be good to highlight that as well.
So 56% would be, what would the denominator and numerator represent on that?
The number of people that voted divided by the number of people that are eligible to register to vote.
Meaning a voting age? Or does that mean people registered?
Citizens and voting age, all the requirements.
Okay, they could be voters if they registered.
Yes.
Or
yeah. But yeah, congratulations, Director Ernst, and good job.
A question on that: does the Secretary of State cite then, or does the city and county keep track of the number of the percentage of eligible voters who register? I mean, there's a 20% gap between the norm, 15% gap between the percentages of eligible and registered who voted. But do we know what percentage of eligible voters actually register, either here or statewide?
Yeah, well, the number of eligible voters that registered is just the number of registered voters.
Right. So it's just the registration.
It's the same pool.
Same pool.
People,
Yeah. So what was the percentage of eligible voters that registered? Do we know?
Well, there were 500,000 registered voters, and there were 660,000 eligible. So I can just do that right now.
That's thank you. That's
Yeah.
So it's 76% about.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions, comments? I do want to point out that there were documents that we included in the agenda pack that we did not actually print out because it was a lot of paper. So, but it is available there.
We did the commissioners, not the BOPEC members.
Oh, not to BOPEC members. Okay, it just was missing mine. I was doing it all from memory, though.
More
Of course.
paper than this.
So yes, you do have all the details, and it is in the agenda book for the public. So if there are.
Also, Director Ernst, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to maybe comment on anything that you thought maybe that you wanted to make a note of, or.
I mean, I think what I said in the notes for BOPEC are good, but another number I can throw out there is the number of conditional registered voters who cast ballots for November is around 55,000 statewide, and then we had, I think, 4,500 in San Francisco, so we had 8% of the total of the people who registered post the 15 days before election day. And then we had, I think in June, we had 1,100 people total who voted or were conditional voter registrants, and we had on election day alone, we had almost 2,200 people come to City Hall to be conditional voter registrants. So those numbers are San Francisco are rather high compared even to the rest of the state. And Commissioner Donaldson was at City Hall. I think that the operation at City Hall was very well organized. The longest wait at the peak, we had 5,000 people come through City Hall on election day. We had at 8 p.m. the last person got in line, which is the longest point in time there was a line. It was a 37-minute throughput, I guess, to get that person to the counter to get a ballot, which is pretty good. So yeah, we just I think we did a good job, and you know, we'll just learn our lessons from this. Though we're not going to think that we've got everything settled and not make improvements. We'll make improvements as we go forward. So, but yeah, the department did I think a fantastic job. Actually, rather impressed with how we ran that election.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I will add that. So I did do observation at this election instead of actually work as a poll worker, and sat in City Hall. Came down early, went to the incident room to see how that went. It was amazingly calm, but a room full of clearly competent folks who were responding to issues in terms of they're doing the opening of the polls. And if you look at the iris log, there's a predominance of things that are around opening and close, of course, if you look at timings, and which makes perfect sense. So I did that. I did drive to a couple polling places just to observe. Something in particular I noticed that was wrong, or for that matter, different from what I've experienced in that role in working in polling places. I think the two other observations. One was that yes, at the end of the day, I did walk the line all the way to the end at 8 p.m., which snaked through from basically the Department of Elections through the north side of City Hall all the way down through the hallway to the east entrance on that floor, and that had to be 200 or 300 people easily. And yes, 37 minutes. I counted it as 40, but I wasn't watching the clock as closely as you probably were, Director Marks. So yes, it was quite, and yeah, there was a big hurrah when the last vote went through. It was quite fun there. The one other thing I noticed is that I did go upstairs after the polls had opened just to see what the pool of available additional poll workers was, and there was like 3 people. Usually that room has 40, 50 people in it. And maybe I'll just ask, so how did you feel about, I think the election again was well run, but how did you feel about the poll worker, your personnel count for this election? Do you have any concerns going forward?
Yeah, we need to, we certainly had less poll workers than we wanted for this election. I think we had sufficient poll workers to staff the polls, and we had sufficient numbers for backups, for standbys. We would have liked to have some more, but one thing we're going to do, and I will talk to the mayor's office, I've already spoken to the board about increasing the poll worker stipend. I know that Alameda, I think it's Alameda, they have a $300 inspector stipend. Ours is around $195, and so I'd like to get ours higher, and also I think I'd like to get the stipend closer to, if we can't do it, at least to get it closer to the city's minimum wage rate. And I think that will also help bring people in as poll workers. I was a bit surprised that we didn't have more for the November election than we did. June, I understand, because it conflicted so much with the school district's schedule. So we had less high school students, but high school students we had near our average compared to past elections. But we just didn't have the standbys. So yeah, it got tight.
Why is the poll working not governed by the minimum wage laws?
Because they're volunteers and they get a stipend. Okay. They're not employees. It's been litigated. So, yeah.
I just have one clarifying question. So did you say 5,000 voters came to City Hall? It's just that like ballots that were casted?
Yeah, for the election day.
Yeah, so it even drop off too?
Oh, no,
or you
that's
mean
just showing up to get a ballot on election day.
To get a ballot.
They went to the counter at the voting center.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, thank you.
And then I think for drop-off, I have that number.
Sorry, not to complicate, I just was curious what the 5,000 was.
Oh, no, just coming to City Hall to get a ballot to vote in.
To get a
Yeah,
ballot.
not dropping off.
That does bring up one other question. You mentioned that there were 4,500 provisional ballots cast. Do you have a, since we're talking stats, do you have a number of same-day registrants at City Hall?
Yeah, so that number was 3,400.
Really?
Then we had six.
Would that be election day, or would that just be that when they came into City Hall day?
That's election day. Then we had 1,600 come in that were non-CBR. So we were right around 5,000 for the day total. And most of that came after 3 p.m.
So there were 3,400 that were same-day registrants?
Correct.
Wow. Works. Great. So, great. Okay, any other questions, commissioners?
I don't see any comments from the public about the election. Were there none? There are none in the... None.
Sounds like Commissioner Giordano had one while he was working at the polling place, but other than that, we had none that came into the election commission. Okay. Do I have a motion regarding the election? We generally certify or take a vote as to our opinion as to whether the election is free, fair, and functional. And it was the recommendation of BOPEC.
So I move that the commission accept the recommendation from BOPEC that it was pretty fair. Functional election.
Very good.
A second.
Secretary Chan, would you call the roll, please?
President Donaldson?
Public
Yes.
comment?
Oh, sorry, excuse me, thank you. Public comment.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is David Carey. Nobody knows how votes were counted in this election, were they counted correctly or not. None of you know. The director doesn't know. No one in the Department of Elections knows. Certainly no one from the general public, even in theory, had an opportunity to independently verify to any significant extent how votes were counted. Maybe it doesn't matter how votes were counted if elections are just another part of political theater. Putting on a good show and going through the motions of meeting minimal requirements is good enough. Real transparency and public verifiability is not just optional, but a nuisance best avoided. Is this all it takes to satisfy this commission that San Francisco had an election that was free, fair, and functional? Sometimes, not often, but sometimes, the public has found cases where the department's published results are incorrect. On occasion, John Arns has certified incorrect results. To be clear, I don't expect perfection, and neither should you. But this does highlight the need and value of transparency and public verification in real elections that are intended to support a democracy. Also, to be clear, the failures that I'm aware of were not caused by Russian hackers or any illegal intervention from outsiders or insiders. Instead, the common thread in these incidents has been poorly designed, buggy, inadequately tested software. The vendor didn't adequately test the software, state regulators didn't adequately review and test the software, the department didn't adequately test the software. Software that incidentally is secret source software, software that for the foreseeable future will continue to be secret source software. With so little known about how votes were counted, I'm not sure how anyone can credibly certify vote totals for this election or approve a finding that the election was free, fair, and functional. What is even worse is that you and the department you oversee have no plan in place to address this fundamental but avoidable problem in San Francisco elections. There is no single magic solution to this problem. Greater transparency in election operations, use of open source software, and use of risk-limiting audits when performed in a way that allows independent public verification are each partial and complementary solutions to this problem. Finding solace in being a little less bad than most other jurisdictions is not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. Any additional public comments? Seeing none, I would like to just comment, at least as a commissioner, that it is true that we don't have, I think, in my opinion, everything we would like in terms of our ability to fully audit and all the tools that I would like, and I think most of us who have been asking for better systems would like, in order to audit these elections and assure that they are free, fair, functional, and absent of fraud, or at least that it's been detected. That said, with the tools that we do have available to us, I feel that that the finding we have, with the limitations of the tools we have available to us, lend some confidence that it was free, fair, and functional. And I will hope for better tools to do so in the future. Any other comments, commissioners? Secretary Chan, would you call the vote, please?
On the motion, President Donaldson?
Yes.
Donaldson, yes. Vice President Mogi?
Yes.
Mogi, yes. Commissioner Bernholt?
Yes.
Bernholt, yes. Commissioner Giordani?
Yes.
Giordani, yes. Commissioner John?
Yes.
John, yes. You have a vote of 5. Oh, Commissioner Rowe, I'm sorry.
That's okay, I was a couple minutes late. Yes.
Rowe, yes. You have 6 voting, motion carries.
Very good. Next item.
Item 5, Commissioners' Report. Commissioner reports on topics not covered by another item on this agenda. Meetings with public officials, oversight and observation activities, long-range planning for commission activities, and areas of study, proposed legislation which affects elections.
I would like to start with a couple of items. One is, yes, welcome Commissioner Rowe. Commissioner Rowe is with us now, and please let the record reflect her arrival. I didn't actually look at the clock, a few minutes late.
I had a heck of a time getting into the building.
Ah, okay.
Turns out you can't come in the normal door with your suitcase.
Oh, yes, there seems to be a new policy
Couldn't find
in
it. So
place.
I apologize. I was a little rat in a maze and trying to find my way into this building.
Well, we're glad you made it. Thank you. Thank you for braving that. Also, I do want to mention that Commissioner Hill was out sick. She did let me know about that, so that would be an excused absence. Another item is that Secretary Chan has tendered his resignation, and we will miss him. The agreed date would be the end of January, to give us some time to look for a replacement. I would like to also let you know that we'll need to take this up at a future meeting. However, I have done some outreach based on just checking in with the Department of Human Resources about existing or our finalists from our prior cycle of looking at this or going out and looking for a secretary, and it would be acceptable to reach out to those folks and ask them if they'd be interested. In my recollection, when we did this, we said that we thought any of the finalists might be eligible. However, we'll have to take that up at the January meeting for any further discussion on that.
On that topic, I would just, I'm concerned with Secretary Chen leaving at the end of the month. I would really prefer to have some overlap between the new candidate and Secretary Chen. I think we can all say that you've done a really amazing job, and you've gotten some systems in place that are very helpful to us, and I would think it's great if it's possible to get someone on board so that there could be a little training going on there, but that means we would probably have to have a special meeting. I would be in favor of that. I think it's pretty important, so I'll just say my 2 cents that if we need to call a special meeting in order to get that process sped up, I'd be in favor.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Rowe.
And I'm sorry to see you go, Secretary Chen.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm sorry to be leaving.
Other commissioner reports?
I just want to report one thing that My term is up on January 1st, and I'm going to be seeking reappointment. So the Board of Supervisors posted an application. So just want to let the commission know.
Do they go through the application and interview process, even if you're already serving?
My understanding is that, yeah, it has to go before the Rules Committee and then just like normal.
Any other commissioner reports? I would like to, Commissioner Hill did send something for an update on the neighborhood turnout disparity project. So she sent wanted me to read this update into the record. So we're happy to report that we found someone to work on the neighborhood turnout disparity policy analysis. Her name's Emma Fernandez. She's a student at Goldman School with a background in helping municipal institutions learn from others' best practices. I'm very excited to work with her beginning in January. Would you mind sharing that update with, yes, I don't mind sharing this update with the Commission. So we have identified someone, there has been a discussion with the department, I believe directly with you, Director Lawrence. So we will have somebody that will be working on that study. Any other comments, Commissioners? Public comment? Seeing none, Secretary Chan, next item.
Item 6, Director's Report. Director's Report on topics not covered by another item on this agenda.
I don't have anything really to add. The Director's Report is kind of a statement of post-election with the transition going forward. I think I did pull another number that came from BOPEC. I think you asked me the number of first-time voters in San Francisco.
Oh, yeah.
So 35,930 was the number of people that cast a ballot for the first time in November in San Francisco. I don't know if they voted elsewhere. That I can't.
Yeah.
But other than that, I don't have anything to add to mine.
I have a couple questions from your report. So I'm noticing that you're going to make some shifts because of the upcoming for 2020 March 2020 primary election. What's kind of like the timeline that you're thinking of starting to just like post these new filing deadlines and everything else to give everyone some ample amount of time to understand the new deadlines?
Both like mayor in District 5 for November, and then going into that'll start in January.
Well, no, I'm just specifically talking about
for
March because it's now going to be an earlier election, right? And so you're going to have newer kind of like filing deadlines that people aren't probably used to, or June elections.
Yeah.
So are you thinking through, just working backwards, like is it just going to be a couple months earlier than what you would anticipate from a June? Just pretty standard.
Yeah, we have a notice process and timeline already in place.
Oh, okay.
For these elections, so we'll move it back in time for the March primary, and I'm less worried about that actually. The big worry, and for those of you who've been on the commission for previous presidential primaries, are the non-partisan voters being eligible to vote for some party and vote some party ballots. That's going to be the issue, more so even than deadlines. But we'll get the word out, and the people that are tuned in are going to be following the process too. But certainly we have a noticing schedule and process we've used in the past. I'm not saying we can't make changes or improve it. If you have ideas, I'm welcome to hear them. But yeah, we'll get the word out.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure there's other things that, to take in consideration. We just had that one Board of Ed incident that was mostly on the actual candidates for getting the incumbent one, and I just don't want any other confusion. And
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
I'm sorry, can you explain the issue that you're concerned about regarding?
So for presidential primary elections, the political parties can allow voters who are registered as having no party affiliation to opt in to vote their party's ballots for the presidential contest. And that's why at the polls you have all those ballots at the polling places, because you have, like the Democratic Party, for instance, allows, usually, as my experience, allowed nonpartisan voters to opt in to vote for the presidential candidates in the Democratic Party. So you have a Democratic ballot, which is just, has all the content, and you have a Democratic presidential primary ballot for nonpartisan voters, and you have a nonpartisan ballot for the nonpartisan voters who have not opted in to vote into a party's ballot. And if you remember that with the Bernie Sanders campaign, when they loaded the room and complained about that, no matter how much information we put out, that's always the issue for a presidential primary election. So, that's certainly. So I'm not discounting the deadlines for filings. But I know from experience that's going to be the big issue as far as getting the word out. And part of it's due diligence, just due to the reaction. But that's what I'm talking about. If that makes sense to you.
I just think it's just more of like a creature of habit thing. Like people just are used to certain, like, oh, primary, it's in June and it's going to, so it's just more on outreach and people just tend to forget, And so it was just more on that, like if there's just more, a little bit, I know people who run elections or campaigns are much in tune with it, but there might be first-time candidates and everything else that are just like, not really kind of a little bit kind of forgetful. And so I just want to make sure that we give enough time in terms of,
Totally agree with you. And what's going to come sooner for people even than the filing is that the ballot simplification committee will be meeting right around Thanksgiving. So while we're still processing ballots for the November election, which will probably be a big one, we'll actually be organizing ballot simplification committee meetings to review and to create digests for the ballots going on for the March ballot.
Right.
And that's going to be a shock to people because it's not a matter of it just coming earlier, it's coming in right at the holiday. And if I remember correctly, the signatures and lieu period starts right around Christmas Day for the March primary election, which again is going to throw people off. Not so much that it's coming early, but when, the holiday. So.
If I could just jump in on that last point, because I was on the issue of the no party preference. I was a poll worker the last presidential primary, and there is massive confusion amongst voters on multiple levels. One, I think, and I don't know what the parties will do this time, but I think at the last one, the Republican Party didn't allow NPPs, and the Democratic Party did, so that was one issue. And then voters didn't necessarily know that NPP is something different than independent, and that was another heated issue with some voters. And then there was a fair amount of voters who didn't realize that for the primary election, you need to be, if you're registered as a Republican, you can't vote Democrat and vice versa. So it takes a lot of poll worker training for sure. And I remember thinking at that time that it might be helpful to have some sort of written document so that when the voters aren't taking the poll worker's word for it, you could actually have something that they could take back with them. Now, I don't know if that causes more problems for you or not, but there were quite a number of, voters who didn't believe what they were being told, at least in my polling place, and I'm sure that will occur again.
It will happen again, and I'm not saying because we don't try. We do put the word out. We actually had a lawsuit brought against us, and the amount of information that we were putting out was, I don't know if you want to talk about that or not, was quite a bit. And
I remember I was on the commission at that time too, and you actually had, I think Josh, you spearheaded the defense of that lawsuit, and I remember reading your papers about the really extensive activities, outreach you guys tried to do to make sure everybody understood it. But, people are busy and people aren't necessarily reading materials from the Department of Elections, and so it's challenging all the way through.
Fully agree.
Puts a lot of pressure on
And that's why I'm bringing it up now.
Yeah.
That's exactly why my purpose of saying it right now. And so we'll be taking this trip together as we go forward into the primary cycle. But yeah, so thanks for the question.
One more, might not be an appropriate question for you, Director Orange, but how far in advance of the primary do the two major political parties need to make that determination?
I don't remember I have to look. I want to say E135.
Yeah, it's at least 3 months for election.
Okay, probably right around this time.
Same time you're going to be doing everything else.
The nomination period begins. You know, and the thing is too, sometimes they'll just send a fax to your office. It's like you don't even know that they're doing it. That was the issue we had with those endorsements. You know, they sent a fax, or I think a fax to some number that we didn't even look for this information. Next thing it was, you know, oh my God, you guys not put our endorsements in the voter guide. So it's not like the parties always help you out to facilitate this. I'll say that as well. Not to hold us blameless if something were to go wrong, but it's not as seamless and easy as it might seem at this point. So.
Thank you.
On the nonpartisan issue, can you remind me, was the issue of a bigger, is it harder to adjust for vote by mail ballots or for in precinct voters?
Both, but there's a different, the challenge with the vote by mail voters is a timing issue because the ballots are coming and going through the mail process. And so if the ballot lands at E29, and then they don't look at it for 2 weeks, and they think, oh my God, I can vote for Democratic ballot if they're an MPP. They've lost that time if they want to vote by mail, and that causes consternation as well. Whereas if you go to the polling place, you can still make a decision at the polling place.
Yeah, what is the process? I feel like I should know this, but what is the process for an MPP voter to request a particular party's ballot in advance?
So the poll workers have a script that they
No, for vote by mail.
So we put a notice, so every household, like we did last time, we haven't created a final plan yet, so I'm not trying to say this is the final effort on the matter. But every household in the city will receive a mailer. Every residential address in the city receives a mailer that describes the ability for nonpartisan voters to vote party ballots for the presidential contest. And the voter guide will have it. And there's also a notice in the vote by mail ballots that we send to the vote by mail voters who have no party affiliation. So when they receive their ballot, there's a notice that tells them, if you want to receive a ballot for X party, tell us. We'll send you another ballot. You know, but it's a matter of when they engage. A lot of times, like with this conditional voter registration, it's obvious that a lot of people engage at the very last moment. And the same is true even for vote by mail voters. They engage at the last possible moment to vote that ballot and get it mailed to us. So it'll be just a huge ongoing messaging, and you know I'll share all the information with the commission, and I can almost promise you now that's going to be one of the significant complaints that we have. People don't know about it. So.
Okay, and I had some questions on a couple of different topics, but one was, I don't see anything in the update about the new voting system, and is there anything on that?
The negotiations are over, so now we're putting together the final documents, so I don't have any formal announcement to make at this point.
Okay, and then related to that, are you going to be requesting any, because it's going to be a new system for voters, are you going to be requesting any additional funding in terms of education on how to use the system?
Yeah, there'll be.
Okay. Do you know like what amount yet, or?
No, there's some money already set aside in our budget for bringing in a new system. So
specifically for education or just in general?
No, that covers the cost. Some education that covers the cost of the contract, which means that we don't have to so we're asking for money for outreach. Won't seem like we're not adding the outreach number to the voting system number, so it won't seem as large. But yeah, we'll certainly, and that will be one of the primary focuses that we have for outreach would be the using the new system.
Okay, and then in the report, this is in section 4B, you mentioned working with the state on VoteCal. You said you're going to share the lessons. I'm not sure the exact wording do you remember what I'm referring to?
We'll be working with the vote call team to suggest improvements on a statewide level. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Yeah, so it sounds like you're developing some new processes around duplicates, and it sounds like you're going to be sharing.
Yeah, and we do. It's not. It's in the report, but it's something we do on an ongoing basis.
Oh, you do that already?
Yeah.
Okay, and then the last thing I wanted to ask about is you made a reference to changes in law, and I was wondering if you know like now, whether?
No, I haven't even had it. I was on a jury last week, and then I have not had time to go through it.
Okay.
Nothing comes. There's a book actually that we get at the conference, which I haven't looked through it. I did talk to some folks today, but I can't think of anything.
Do you think maybe for the next meeting you could just share with us any changes? Okay, thanks. Appreciate it.
Great. Any other questions, commissioners? Public comment?
Good evening. My name is Jim Silverman with the Voting Rights Task Force. Couple comments. One, 2 years ago, there were a lot of people, Bernie voters, who were signing up for American Independent, and then they were not allowed to vote Democrat, and it was rather irritating. John got a lot of flack for that he didn't deserve. I went to the California Association of Clerks of Elections Officials Conference last week in Sacramento. And they had on Friday, they had a panel of 4 of the registrars that had vote center elections pilots. And there were 2 takeaways for me on that. I don't know what's going to happen in San Francisco, but these are 2 takeaways. One, they were getting better staff. A vote center is where you have fewer precincts, but anybody can vote from any vote center in the county, and it's open for up to 10 days. And so they had fewer staff to hire, and one county actually put the potential poll workers through the county hiring process and was able to check background and things like that. So that's a plus. And the other comment that I hadn't thought about was it said, this is not cheaper than precinct voting. Just because you have fewer polling places does not mean it's open longer. So whatever happens in the future, do not expect necessarily cost savings. I think it's worth it. I like it, but I hadn't thought about that side. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stoker.
Commissioners, David Carey here. On the issue about the March presidential primary, I'll mention 2 things that I think weren't mentioned in your discussion. One is that my understanding, the reason we're having March primary is that it will mean California has a primary as well. There's probably wide open field, particularly for the Democratic Party this time. And so it's less likely that that will sneak up on voters in a sense, because we might actually have candidates who are campaigning in California and San Francisco and not just coming to get money. The other thing is that in the last presidential primary, I know there were some Green Party people who switched their registration just so they could vote in the Democratic Party. And in some cases, whether that registration went through in time or not was an issue. And unlike the last presidential primary, this time we'll have some form of same-day registration. And I'm not sure to what extent that will complicate things or make things easier, make some of those issues easier to resolve, but it is another factor.
Additional public comment? Seeing none. I would like to ask Director Arns, the same-day registration, does that allow one to change one's registration same day?
Yes.
Okay. And do you know of those that were same-day registrations, how many, or were there any?
Well, I didn't do that breakdown. I know that there was X number of CDRs.
And so if I changed, then it would be, again, provisional, and that would happen if I changed parties or something set on the same day registration?
Can I ask one last question? It's kind of related, not really, just that we're talking about the 2020 election already. Just because I actually have no idea of how things work, is What's kind of also then additionally, like the timeline for like census and redistricting for 2020? Like, does that happen after 2020 and is it 2021, 2022? Or?
The redistricting of the
Yeah,
districts?
yeah.
No, that'll happen end of 21. Needs to happen end of 21 if the primary is. I don't know if the state, I can't remember if the state primary is in March, it might be still in June. But ideally, the census data will be released in time, the task force will be formed to allow the city to redraw the lines for the soup districts.
Right.
And to use those new lines to draw precincts for the primary in 2022.
Okay.
Because the state elections code requires that the precincts used in the primary are the same precincts used for the general. But if it's held in March, depending on when the Bureau releases the data and when the task force does its work, I was thinking about this myself, I don't have the timeline in my head, but 2022 is when it all should be done. It should be all in place by the primary election.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
One other question about the voting centers in SB 450. Would that be implemented in the 2020 election year, or would that be thereafter?
Right now, no. There hasn't been, so San Francisco, that's actually a rather large change in undertaking. And that's one thing all the counties are saying. I did attend the Secretary of State's session, I probably one session I got to at the conference. All of them said that even plans starting now, it wouldn't be enough time in their minds to get ready for a presidential cycle. And two, there's a lot of requirements in the SB 450 that potentially don't suit San Francisco because of our density. We're not a spread out county, which is, if you read SB 450, you could easily apply that to LA, San Bernardino, places like that, even Contra Costa, even Napa, but not so much for San Francisco. And there's also ways potentially to look at voting centers without going all vote by mail, trying to get potentially, think about adding a vote center for the November 2019 election, and not have it for the full early voting period, but part of the period, and expand out from there incrementally, because it is a large change for the department, certainly, but it's also a large change for voters. And I think it would be good to have a transition from polling places, because you guys don't probably hear it, but certainly I do. We don't control polling places. We can't compel anyone to provide space for a polling place. We're searching every election for polling places. And there are instances where maybe it's a school, maybe it's a fire station, who knows. The reason, but the polling place continues through time for multiple elections, and people get used to that. And they think that's how they vote. It's, that's their manner of voting, and they become very emotionally attached to that location. But then maybe there's construction at a school. We don't have access to that site, and we hear it. I mean, that's the topic that we get the hottest calls about, is that people's polling places change. Another factor too is, this past election, I think we had 56,000 vote by mail ballots dropped off at polling places. So even though people are receiving their ballots in the mail, and their vote by mail ballots, they still take advantage of their local polling place to deliver the ballot. So the idea that their vote by mail voters really isn't fully factual for something like 18% of the electorate, depending on the turnout, up to a quarter of the vote can come in by people dropping off ballots at polling places. So I don't think a sudden change to vote centers is really the way to go in San Francisco. And I think it takes time, and really the city has to make that choice. The board has to hear this. The mayor has to be a part of it. There has to be a public input on this, and even that's beyond just what's required with SB 450, because there is a noticing requirement, planning requirement in SB 450. But I think we have to do more and really get that message out too, because just like with the party affiliation for presidential primary elections, people had the same polling place for a number of years, and there's like this big promotional push to tell them that we're going to voting centers and go to the X place, but if X place wasn't their polling place for the last 5 to 10 years, people aren't going to know where to go. you know, and that's going to be an issue. So I mean, certainly I see the advantages of it, but we have to, I think, it has to be a real citywide conscious decision to go into this beyond just what 450 requires when it comes to noticing and planning.
And when would you start thinking about any of those changes?
Oh, we already are. I mean, we're already thinking about it. We're already looking at our process, looking at, you know, what sites now potentially could be, trying to think of what potential changes in state law we would need to do. And then, I mean, really, if we could, I'd like to add another, if we could, and it's not a promise, but add a vote center even for the November 2019 election, just to get that idea out there. And it's not something that's been funded in the past, too. So we're in a budget cycle, and so adding something new like that on top of adding a voting system implementation. But yeah, it's all, you know, there's a lot of change going on when it comes to elections.
Thank you.
Were you at the panel with the registrars talking about it, or?
No, I was not on the panel.
Or at the panel watching?
Yeah, it was in the conference room. So I was in the conference room.
And were the registrars, like on the balance, were they saying that it was sort of, were they like raving about it, or were they saying there's a lot of challenges? What was sort of, okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah. And then would the voting center, would it be significantly different from what you have set up at City Hall in terms of like what you need to have?
Yeah, because the level of support that we give this voting center cannot be matched elsewhere in the city. It'd be impossible. So it just wouldn't happen.
Yeah. Okay.
Very good. Any other questions or comments, commissioners? All right. All right. I guess moving on to, before we move on to the next item, I just should have mentioned earlier that Commissioner Joan may have to leave early and prior notice to that. So just so everybody knows. Okay. Next item.
Do you need public comment on this?
We have public comment. Yeah.
Okay. Item 7, excuse me, consent calendar. Items may be removed from the consent calendar agenda at the request of any one member. Items not removed may be adopted by general consent without debate. Removed items may be taken up either immediately or after consent calendar or placed later on the agenda at the discretion of the commission. We have 2 items: approval of minutes of October 17th, 2018 Elections Commission meeting, and the Elections Commission's responses to the civil grand jury's recommendations. The letter from President John Olson.
So I just want to point out that on the letter, there is a typo in that letter at the end, which it should say 2019 instead of 2020, but essentially is asking for an extension to finalize the response to 4 recommendations. So in terms of the consent calendar, I guess we first would ask if there's any items that anyone wants to pull from the consent calendar for separate discussion or review.
Am I allowed to ask a question?
Sure. We haven't really done this before. There's only one item, so.
So were there any changes with the minutes since you sent that out to the commission?
There were none suggested.
If no one wants to pull any consent items, then do I have a motion?
I move that we adopt the items in the consent calendar.
Second.
Secretary Chan, would you call the vote, please?
President Donaldson?
Yes.
Donaldson, yes. Vice President Hoagie?
Do you need public comment?
Excuse me, public comment, yes.
Vice President Mogi?
Yes.
Mogi, yes. Commissioner Bernal?
Yes.
Bernal, yes. Commissioner Giordani?
Yes.
Giordani, yes. Commissioner Jung?
Yes.
Jung, yes. Commissioner Rowe?
Yes.
Rowe, yes. Motion carries.
Okay, and let's say that if there is any public comment, we'll take it now and we would revote post-public comment if there were any. Seeing none, next item.
Item 8, I'm sorry, it's misnumbered. Item 8, agenda items for future meeting. Discussion and possible action regarding items for future agendas.
I'll just suggest, since it was such a topic of interest the last time around the presidential primary, we might want to have an item where we just give the public a chance to give suggestions on improvements we can make over the last time.
Okay. So we can work that offline. I'd like to work that. Okay. Other items?
Are our elections next month?
I was just going to mention that. Yes. So so for next month we will have an election for the commission president and vice president. Other items would be for the secretary. So Commissioner Rowe, you suggested that it was important enough that we might want to have a separate meeting on that in advance of the January meeting, which we could do. I guess I kind of like to judge what other commissioners felt about a meeting on that topic sooner than next month's regularly scheduled meeting.
So my interest, I want to hear from everyone, of course, but I would say, as I think about it, is it possible to do anything through BOPEC that would speed up that process? For instance, have BOPEC look at applicants or vet whomever from the last time around finalists are still here? Because if you could do that, you wouldn't have to have a special meeting. You could do the vetting process at BOPEC, and then we could have a regular meeting where we maybe even interview a couple people and hopefully are able to make a decision promptly. I don't necessarily need a special meeting. I just feel
want to move it forward more
would
quickly.
really benefit from being able to work alongside our president secretary if it's at all possible. We've never had that possibility, but if it could, I don't know if you have any thoughts about whether we could do that at a BOPEC level, or even just a president level with maybe one other member trying to help him out. I don't know.
Well, so from the last election process, there were 3 total finalists. Of course, Don was selected. There are 2 other people, and so President Donaldson and I have been just connecting with HR to see who those people are, whether they still meet the minimum qualifications, and whether they're available to be hired if the commission is still so interested. So it's a process we're going through now.
I'm going to guess that they're not. It's been quite a while. So it would be great if one of them, I don't remember who they were, but it would be great if somebody that we deemed qualified last time is still available. But I think we have to assume that they're not because so much time has passed. So what do we do if they're not? Is there any way we can speed this up and get someone hired more quickly?
I mean, I think this is, we're already kind of like passing beyond, I think, like agenda items for next meeting. And I think if we wanted to have the discussion about the process, it sort of has to be agendized.
So why don't I suggest that you speak with the president about that? And you know my concern, and you guys can try to figure out a process.
How we can accelerate.
I mean, like short of having a special meeting, what could happen is, if it turns out that someone is still available who was a finalist in the last process, President Donaldson could bring that person's name to the commission next time, and the commission could vote on just whether to hire that person or whether to interview that person at the next meeting, as opposed to
I hear you on that. I just think it's unlikely that somebody's still going to need a job that was a finalist. How long have you been working for us, Secretary Chad? So I'm just saying we need to have a backup plan.
There is one person.
Oh, okay.
Who was available. There may be the other person may be available.
Okay, great. I stand corrected.
So, yeah. Otherwise, I mean, it would have to be, there would have to be a discussion process at the next meeting where the commission votes to authorize HR to kind of post a particular listing, how long it stays open, and then what the review process for those resumes is. I think
Sorry, we cannot have them post a listing unless we have voted on it, and we can't vote on it unless it was on an agenda item.
That's right, yeah.
Okay. Any other agenda items for future meetings, commissioners?
Is it okay for me to say, I think we've got at least, actually we have two, but one of them's not here. On the elections for next time, is it okay for me to just do quickly the process so that you will be prepared for what's going to happen? Typically what we do is we encourage nominations for president. Sometimes I think there's been occasion where there's been more than one, and then we sort of vote up or down on one person, and then we get somebody selected as president, and then we do the same thing for vice president. So, ahead of time, just sort of, I think people should be thinking about whether they would be willing to serve. I'm looking at you, Commissioner Mogi. And then we make our recommendations and we vote on it in that manner. So,
during the same at next meeting, are we also going to do like a BOPEC kind of reorg as well, or is that? Can we do that?
We can certainly put that on the agenda.
I think. We've discussed that we would join the BOPEC committee. Commissioner Jung and I for this year and reconsider. So we'd love to go through that.
Okay, we will see about a discussion about reconstituting BOPEC membership.
Maybe a good thing to hold off for the next president.
I mean, that's something that the president, I mean, we don't have to have a meeting about it. The president can just name people.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, okay.
Can I unname people? Myself?
I think, frankly, I don't want to say it out loud, but I think, frankly, anyone can unname themselves at any time.
Right. Okay. Well, I think having a discussion about BOPEC might be worthwhile. And yes, how we will commissioners that would be on it. That's fine. Any other items?
The other topic I can think of is the new voting system, and I think at some point it would probably be worth focusing in on that. And I don't know if that would be, what month that would be though.
What if we did want to? What would the topic, the essence of that be?
Well, I think we'd want to learn about it, and then maybe just learn about the rollout process, and maybe even, I don't know, see a demo or something. Sure.
Maybe how it would change procedurally, anything that's done. Let's see about that.
Hey, Director Ernst, when do you know, I have a sense of when the things will be finalized and signed?
It depends who's signing. It has to go through the board has to also approve the contract. If you remember, when we last put a voting system contract to the board, there was a delay of 2.5 years to get it approved, so who knows how this is going to spin. But I'll sign it, hopefully this, in January, hopefully the vendor signs it in January. And then it has to go, then the city attorney has to sign it. And the final signature would be the Office of Contract Administration. It'd be after the board has approved the contract.
And then how long would it be before the city actually receives the new system if they were to sign
it? We could receive it right now.
Oh, okay.
It's just a matter of the process.
Okay. Anything else, commissioners? Public comment? Seeing none, Secretary Chan, next item.
Item 9, objectives and process for annual performance evaluation, Director of Elections. Discussion and possible action regarding the preparation of objectives and processes for performance evaluation of the Director of Elections.
You don't need to. Okay. I do want to just mention as we get into this that we will have a brief closed session tonight just to go over, and in just Commissioner's agenda packs, our Director Arndt's self-evaluation. What is available to the public is our original document for the Department Head Strategic Plan Performance Plan Report with some markups. So the essence is that we would follow this process. There was a expectation, however, that we would be doing some sort of an employee engagement survey, which has not actually happened. In the past, we had, before, I guess we did last year, we did do some interviews of employees. My recommendation at this point is that we forego that process of employee interviews and engage the Department of HR, who has shown a willingness to work with us on a employee engagement survey, which we have not, but we don't have one for this last year. Beyond that, it would be using basically this guideline in terms of rating and in these areas. In addition, in the agenda pack, you will find at the back, it has a tag with a 1 on it. This was, and I've been working with Commissioner Hill on this, we went through the through notes and the director's report to basically in these areas corresponding to what we had for the appraisal elements, sort of a statement of facts, a high-level summary in these various areas of things that have gone on over the last year. This is, again, by going through the minutes as well as, and primarily also the director's reports from each meeting. So that was inputs. In terms of the process, from this point, the suggestion is to go forward with reviewing the director's self-evaluation. We would have a closed session tonight just to ask any questions that commissioners might have about that. And I understand, commissioners, that you, I think we did not actually get this distributed other than tonight. So anyway, that's still the suggestion, is that we have a closed door session with Director Arntz for any questions. And then we would, commissioners would formulate their own rating and any comments, which they would then, we would consolidate through Secretary Chen, and then Commissioner Hill would take it from there to further consolidate it into a single evaluation to be distributed to the commissioners before the next meeting, and then we would do the evaluation at the next meeting. Any questions, objections, concerns with that approach? Okay. Any questions on the documents that you have?
So can you just clarify what are the things we need to vote on today, and what are we going to do publicly versus?
There's no voting today. It's just strictly a matter of reviewing. Closed session would be to review Director Arnt's self-evaluation and ask any questions that we would have of Director Arntz this time. And then we would do, before the next meeting, we would ask for the commission members to rate the director and provide any comment on each of the sections.
Do we have to approve this performance plan wording at all, or?
Can't remember if we did this before or not.
Commissioner Hill has some comments in margin.
Yes, so we did have those comments, and we did not. Yes, we have not had, I guess, a vote on this particular outline. We certainly could. We can go through it.
I guess I'm just asking what, which version would we be using? The one, just basically ignore the comments?
Except for the one is that we would be deprecating the one here about the, particularly the rating based on an employee engagement survey.
I'm sorry, deprecating the rating on?
Removing that as a criteria.
Okay, and so on that point, did I understand you correctly that your proposal is we don't have time to do the survey for this year, so we would do that next year?
That is the suggestion, yes.
And I agree with that. Obviously, we don't have time. I just want to note for this commission that we are historically bad at getting that moving. I think it was 2 years ago that we did the employee interviews, and I think last year we wanted to do something else and we didn't get our act together in time to do it, so I may be remembering incorrectly. I think this will be 2 years in a row with no input from the employees, which I think we all think is valuable. So I'm not criticizing anyone here, I'm just saying we need to follow through on that, and I'm not exactly sure where the process stands dealing with DHR on that, but if no one's taking ownership of it, then we need to make sure somebody does, because it just falls through the cracks because of the nature of this meeting once a month and you know, rotating people handling the review process. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Rowe. Commissioner Jordanic, if you would, this is substantially, I think, what we had before. I think the difference is the evaluation criteria has been stipulated here in a little more detail than before in my writing. And so we hadn't actually voted on this. We certainly could if we want to make it, if we want to go to that formality.
I'm fine with it as changed and fine with doing it without a vote if that's okay.
Okay, Commissioner Jordanic?
I mean, only if we need to vote. I mean, I don't feel like we need to.
Okay, very good. All right. Then if there's no other questions or comments about the process, public comment before we go into closed session. Okay. Seeing none. Deputy City Attorney, point.
Vote to go to closed session.
Have to vote to go. Thank you. Do I have a motion to go into closed session?
I move that we go into closed session.
Second.
Secretary Chan?
President Donaldson?
Yes.
Donaldson, yes. Vice President Mogi?
Yes.
Mogi, yes. Commissioner Reynolds?
Yes.
Reynolds, yes. Commissioner Jordanic?
Yes.
Jordanic, yes. Commissioner Rowe?
Yes.
Rowe, yes. You have 5 voting motion carries.
Okay. We will take a 2-minute break while we lock the doors. Yes. Okay. We set. Very good. We are returning to open session for the San Francisco Elections Commission. We have on item, remind me the item number, Secretary Chan.
9.
Item 9, closed session regarding the appraisal process for Director Arntz. We voted as a commission unanimously to re-enter an open session and disclose nothing. Any public comment? Seeing no public to comment, I call this meeting of the San Francisco Election Commission adjourned at 8:37.